mogopolo ka yo teng tsa mongwe le mongwe wa bona a go iteka ga tsatsi le tlhabile la rame ke gaketsa o bona ke riana ke tsamile.
Freedom Square until 8 a.m.
The Botswana Congress Party BCP has launched its presidential candidate Dumelang Saleshando ahead of the October 2024 general election. The party leadership and general membership convened at 𝗨𝗏𝗏 grounds in 𝗥𝗨𝗦𝗛𝗏 on Saturday in an emotional ceremony. Besides stating their intentions ahead of the polls, the BCP also paid tribute to its founding father, Dr. 𝗪𝗪𝗠𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪�ึ the 11th of February 1928, died on the 7th of April 2024 after a short illness, and the 96-year-old was the founding president of the BCP and, according to many, a freedom fighter of note. Today we are hosting CDE Saleshando, the current president of the BCP, and we want to talk about immortalizing our political heroes and to address a few talking points from the weekend presidential candidate launch. You can also hit us up on our WhatsApp line +267 391 1066 if you have questions or something to add to the conversation. Lord Dooms, how are you,
sir? Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, my king. What did you learn from Dr. 𝗥𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗙
I met 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪�ึ And he had just quit his job at the university to take up active politics and contest for the 1994 parliamentary elections. So he first had to contest for primary elections in Gaborone Central, and then also at the same time contest for position Yabu BNF vice president at the time. Initially, I wasn't really endeared to 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 I thought for an opposition leader he was rather too soft. If you know how he spoke, and just didn't, in my view, he had the fire in the belly to take on what was a very arrogant ruling party then, I would say. But before the time to vote came in the primary elections, he convinced me when I was listening to him at one political rally, the manner in which he articulated his vision for the country and the constituency. Whereas the opponent, who in my view was the fiery character that we needed, mainly focused on attacking the persona called 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪. And that for me turned me off about my candidate. And I decided, look, this is an internal contest. I think in 𝗥𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪�ึ he did turn out to be a long-term investment. When he became MP and Central Committee for Botswana National Front, he overhauled the party. He modernized it. It was under his watch that for the first time the party had an office. Before he came in, the party was run from the home of the party leader. It was under him that there was structure to the party. You had a very aggressive campaign program. Parliamente R12, because at the time I think BNF had 13 MPs, but Rekoma, because of age and health, didn't really travel much across the length and breadth of the country. But 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪�ึ to go out and grow the party. And people started making all manner of malicious allegations. Kana he's doing this because he wants to ultimately take over. But that's history. Maybe let's not focus on that. As they say, fast forward, he formed the BCP. And look, this was the man, at least up to now, this is the man who served the shortest time as president of the BCP. But his fingerprints are all over the DNA of the BCP. He was a very strong advocate for good governance, that you must follow the rules that we have all agreed upon. You must follow the constitution. He called for discipline. Have structures in place that will take decisions for and on behalf of the party. He was very vocal on women's issues. It was because of him that the constitution had the provision, or has the provision, that all structures of the party must have a minimum of 30% women representation, which was a standard set by SADC. So for me, we're talking about a very visionary leader who has impacted Botswana politics in the short period that he was active here. Major impact in South African politics, because I think he took it's a Martin Luther King approach to that. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So for him being in South Africa and not being in Botswana did not matter. He could not condone the injustice that he experienced. He rolled up his sleeves and got involved, even when he knew that this is a cause for which he could lose his life. Not go to jail, but lose his life. Because in some instances, charges leveled against black people during those days could attract the death penalty. So it's literally putting your life on the line. And he paid a heavy price, losing 15 years of your most productive years. Kana, when he came here, he was already qualified to be a pensioner. So he lost what could have been the productive part of his years because of jail. And we also know now from one of the speakers who came from South Africa that when he became a full-time operative of the ANC, he had to forgo a job that was paying him 45, I don't know if it's dollars or pounds at the time, and take up the ANC one which was paying him 15. So he ended up settling for 1/3 of what he was otherwise earning. So this is a man who's always been about service to the nation. Yes.
So is he a BCP hero or a Botswana hero?
Oh, he's much bigger than us as the BCP. We are happy to have associated with him. It was a privilege to have worked with him. But he is also bigger than Botswana. I think he is a great African. Some called him an internationalist. Yes, he was, because he took interest in issues such as what is happening in places like Israel and the battle with the Jews. So he was an internationalist, but he has made a major impact within our region. So he's bigger than our party and bigger than Botswana.
So before we go to the news headlines with Oratile, South Africans have heroes like Steve Biko and Peter Makaba, who I've read about.
Yes.
Black Americans have Martin Luther King and my favorite Malcolm X. If indeed Dr. Dinglake falls within that class, what can we do as Botswana to immortalize our heroes and ensure that his name lives forever?
Well, I must say that it was a bit unfortunate that initially government was sluggish even in acknowledging his passing at the time. I think the government statement must have, if it ever did come out, besides Masisi going to visit the family. And I know for certain that 3-4 days into his death, government was quiet. It was as if nothing has happened. And of course, it's because the BDP generally doesn't want to acknowledge anything good that may come from outside their ranks. That is what informs the BDP generally. But I think we certainly need to do more. We as a party, in our own small way, we will be reflecting over this. How do we make sure that the name Michael Dinglake is not forgotten? How do we make sure that the values he stood for can influence young upcoming politicians? I'm a beneficiary of having worked with Dinglake. He benefited, well, maybe as a campaign for him, but I don't think he really benefited much from me. It was one-way traffic. The values that I talked of, that he stood for, are much more instilled in me because of having had associated with him. And the question really is, how do we make sure that we don't have young people joining politics for the wrong reasons? I have a lot of people who sometimes say, if that was the philosophy of Dinglake and others, apartheid may still be in place as we speak today. Because so we need more people to come out into the open and show their hands. And when they hear the Dinglake story, hopefully we'll say, oh wow, I would like to follow in the footsteps of this giant that walked our streets in Botswana.
Today we are hosting Dumelang Saleshando, the president of the BCP, and we are talking about immortalizing our political heroes, and we are also going to address a few talking points from the presidential candidate launch at the weekend, specifically women empowerment or women participation in politics. CDE Saleshando, ame bonnana le the upcoming generation ko BCP ba itse ka bo Dr. 𝗥𝗨𝗦𝗛𝗛 and the numerous books that he has ko ileng gore ba ka draw inspiration e teng ba bona vision ya party.
But the good thing is that the family is talking about launching a 𝗥𝗨𝗦𝗛𝗘 Foundation. We will obviously be consulting with them over that. There are even ideas that should we not, in conjunction with the political party he worked with in South Africa, possibly be looking at a 𝗥𝗨𝗦𝗛𝗘 library. It need not be a huge structure or in that type of thing. The other Botswana, by the way, who also participated in the South African struggle, who we don't know much about, Bore 𝗕𝗕𝗓𝗔𝗡𝗚 𝗘𝗨𝗪𝗧𝗔, Bore 𝗕𝗕𝗓𝗧𝗪 𝗘𝗑𝗪𝗓. So I'm hoping that out of this we'll have some coordinated effort to say, can there be a deliberate effort, not necessarily a party-oriented effort, to say to younger people, because I think, like I said, 𝗥𝗨𝗦𝗛𝗃 was bigger than us, the BCP, and we can't try to then say we own him or we've got rights over him. It would be too selfish an attempt by the BCP to try and do that. So I am hoping that this year something will come out of that, but as we just come out of the funeral, I think within good time there will be some announcements that will be made. 𝗪𝗛𝗏 also on behalf of the presidency 𝗥𝗨𝗦𝗃𝗨𝗏 did indicate that they have heard Botswana's cry for 𝗥𝗨𝗦𝗃𝗧𝗏 to be recognized, and he actually then said the best way to pay tribute to him this year would be for the two countries that he was active in, his adopted country South Africa and his homeland Botswana, to see if they can hold elections that we would say live up to the ideals of 𝗥𝗨𝗦𝗃𝗧𝗏. I placed the challenge to him that I've got two proposals to make, which I know 𝗥𝗨𝗦𝗃𝗧𝗏 would have verily supported or heartily supported. Why don't we allow for changes in this coming election? We know where the gaps are. The AU has made a report to say that Botswana elections need to have change the manner in which we count the ballots. This system ya go transport the box ka dikoloi masigo. And in my area, like I said before, in some instances, for more than 3 hours driving, it just diminishes the credibility of the election. SADC has said the same thing about our counting of ballots. IEC yone ka bo yone e nile le di report tse di dirweng ke di consultants that they engaged to say here is a gaping hole that will compromise the election. The other part is that go na le allegations of possible multiple voting. We used to have a system that guarded against that. It was use of what we call indelible ink. In a rotopa bo tsenya Botswana ba re monwana wa 𝗕𝗗𝗘𝗘𝗘𝗚 o motona mo teng ga ink ye ne sa tswe motlho. It was stopped. Just stopped for very funny, weird reasons. At the time, Parliament, in its wisdom or lack of, decided that there is a risk for ink may be spreading HIV/AIDS. So they stopped it. But we know it doesn't. It has no impact. So we've been asking them to reintroduce the ink. And they say, why can't we do that? It doesn't require any huge funds. And then we would say, in memory of 𝗥𝗨𝗦𝗃𝗧𝗏, let's agree on this is at the bare minimum. We can do more. One of the things we have about the electoral system is that it doesn't give us as many female parliamentarians as we would aspire to. And it's because of the electoral system we use. Maybe don't first past the post. Even very old democracies, such as the UK and Canada, Australia, but first past the post. They hardly ever go over 5% or 10%. But there are other countries that use systems that are able to deliver on gender parity. South Africa and Namibia are examples where they use proportional representation. And for every man you have as an MP, there must be an accompanying woman. So their balance is at about 50-50. Other countries like Rwanda have more women than men. So I think I know this one maybe would require a little bit more engagement. But these are the sort of reforms that we need to our democracy. If we are really to say we had great giants working here on issues of democracy, and they influenced this very modern constitution that we have in South Africa. Why can't we do it ourselves here?
You know, I was very disappointed last year when we read the report after the IEC and the University of Botswana did a study on voter apathy.
Yes.
They talk about a whole lot of things, including women participation.
Yes.
I reached out to all political parties, but yours is the only one that responded and said, indeed, we had read this. We have something to say about it. Other parties look at it like, so now my question here would be, as much as we want people to participate in politics, we want them to be politically and intellectually sound.
Yes.
Before we talk about women participation at BCP, do we have enough Botswana right now who want to be involved in politics but are sound in all aspects that are needed for you to be a good politician?
No, and I think it's a very clear no from me. And I know there's been different publications that speak to that. We don't have a system of empowering our youth with the relevant information around issues of politics. Other countries do have a deliberate effort. We also want to bring up a socially and politically responsible citizen. Or patriotism, a patriot, you also have a civil duty to vote. And these are the reasons why you vote. No one teaches anyone here. Leone IEC has come out to say that is not our mandate. It's not in our law. So no one is responsible to teach Botswana ka politiki ka go tlhopha. And as a result, you have people who say, you see the reasoning. It devalues our democracy. And I think this played itself out more strongly when we were the review of the Constitution. Our people don't know what the Constitution is. I mean, I at one point just stopped listening to the deliberations. I remember it was a go kwala mo constitutioneng gore ha kulo ya go e ka sengwa thaere ke pothole o duelwa bokae. A ke ba ntse ka lesolo gore le rona go ga rona go Northwest, some of the proposals are far from the constitution. Bo gore a go kwala gore ha tlo yo go senyeditse masimo o duelwa bokae. In fact, a lot of the recommendations, more than half, I think they put it about 75, have nothing to do with the Constitution. So we've denied our people the right to know about their own laws, about their own country, about their political environment. So it's something that needs to be addressed, because if we don't address it and we keep attracting people not necessarily suited for politics, I've seen it before. Not traveling with other MPs. Debate on regional bodies. Electoral system. Your average MP in Botswana doesn't know the different electoral systems. True. It's true. They don't know. Mixed member proportional representation. And you feel the hurt. O simola go tshoga hela ga o bona your colleague from Botswana Parliament a tsholetsa letsogo a re wa kgela gore oh my god. Because it's reflecting on the country. So really we need to invest a little bit more on trying to make sure that we have a politically conscious nation and not a nation that is literally sleepwalking through elections.
You have your work cut out for you, go BCP. Yeah, no, let's narrow it down to women participation. You have to recruit these people. You have to create an environment that welcomes them. But at the same time, degree, politics, and the electoral system and all of that.
Yes.
How are you doing currently?
I don't think we're doing as well as I would have liked, because previously we did more than what we are doing currently. I think you've heard before on a lead clip it's let's abore the vice president that was leaked the BCP cadre is totally different from any other. The party has done well to invest in educating its young people. So we've got we are acknowledged as the front runners, but I think we have slowed down in the recent past. It's something that we need to address as a party. Because what we used to do is to go right down to the local communities and bring our foot soldiers together to say to them, understand even what the party stands for. We are a social democratic formation. Because we always need to remind people, we are really the cultural staunch, supporters of tradition. Abo emela hela mo party ngore ga to go batela eng basadi mo maemo like every time I hear a statement like that, for me it's like we are lagging behind. Motho ga itse say I can't stand up go sabata ke bekere kantekeng re sa obame ka sonta ga kere the moment ke emela ke bua jalo
ga wa sabata
I shouldn't be there akere so le rona because of lack of this education are in the party but are not properly oriented. So it's a weakness I acknowledge, and I'm hoping that as a collective going forward we will do more. The policies are there. I mean, we've got, for example, affirmative action. BCP, you don't pay as much as what your male counterpart pays. You pay half, 50%. It used to be a 30% at one point. We've now put it at 50%. We are going into an election, and I'm hoping that we will also be able to make some pronouncements where the party will dedicate greater resources to the female candidates. Well, to start off with, I can't launch all the candidates, but Mokoteki launching as the party leader, it has to include all the female parliamentary candidates. So those are the small steps we are taking as a party to try and make sure that we make the BCP a place of comfort for female politicians.
And in wrapping up, let's talk about all the party structures. I believe even the voter as a woman is important, going all the way up. Representation, I think, in Tzijang, I heard you earlier on talk about 30%.
Yes.
Where are you at right now? The MP members.
Okay. The way the party operates is that and the ward committee, it's constitutionally it's binding that that committee must have not less than 30% women representation. If you elect a committee less than 30% bombe, it immediately has to be so all our structures, wherever they are compliant. If any information is brought to attention, or there is one that does not comply, immediately. And then we have the next layer, which is your constituency. The same applies up to the regional and the central committee. My wish is for the party to reflect and reconsider increasing that from 30%, because it was the right figure at the time we adopted it. But many organizations have now moved to 50%, so that we portray true gender balance. There's something young people talk of these days, but the optics, it just doesn't look right. I mean, I'm happy nowadays that when we have political rallies, I mean, there was one case recently where a constituency flighted the lineup of speakers at the rally. And immediately, within WhatsApp groups, party, people were saying, is this a men's conference? And the affected constituency immediately retracted. So the culture is getting there. But we need to now move beyond 30%, because 30% was supposed to be a starting point. I'm hoping for a post the general election at 2024, we will be moving to 50%. as a position of the party. That is my desire, to move to 50%. And once we are there, the real difficult one has always been, call it the elephant in the room. How do we then make sure, with all the processes, freely a parliamentary candidate? What we've been doing has worked but has not delivered the goods. Because at the moment, we are only sitting at 10% of our parliamentary candidates. You, of course, don't want to impose a candidate on the voters. The voters must decide. And if you block out competent male candidates, it could have electoral consequences that are dire. But we need to find a balance. And I think more education would be the right way to go. Increasing the number of women in our leadership structures would be the way to go. And by 2029, we're planning on winning 31 constituencies. With 31 constituencies and BCP in government, one of the first things we will do is to amend the electoral laws to make sure that we have a parliament that reflects the mix of our population. We have male and females almost at 50%. In fact, females are more. We must have a parliament that also reflects the average age in this country. We need to try and see how we bring young people to also take up their seats in the National Assembly. So 2029, I'm promising it will be a different ball game under the BCP leadership.
Dr. Unity Dao, Dr. Peko, but the next president is a BCP. Is it true?
Oh, if so, why not? But look, guys, those are some of the gems we have in our party. Those are some of the flowers that are blossoming in the BCP, and they should be given the space to shine, so that my little girl at home, Raymond, who will not be voting in this election, in fact, there's a time when 𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗪, and she's BDP obviously, was appointed Minister of Finance. I made time to talk to my daughter, hey, do you know something happened today? Here is a first female Minister of Finance. And every time I'm traveling with her, if it's air travel and I see a female pilot, I'll call her and say, hey, you must look at that. If you want to have a chat with her, the size of the planes she flies. Because it's also about the young Botswana girl believing that I can do everything that my brothers can do. I think in the words of Peter Tosh, maybe they should sing, anything you can do, I can do it better, I am the toughest.
And in closing, in the words of my favorite author, 𝗪𝗠𝗪𝗪 Jr., a leader ensures that no one is treated unjustly.
Yes.
And he also ensures that those who need help the most get the most constructive help. So please go out there and represent all Botswana, even those who are outside of the BCP.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you more
Thank you so much, my king. Today we hosted CDE Saleshando, the president of the BCP. We were talking about immortalizing our political heroes, and we also addressed a few talking points from the weekend presidential candidate launch.